Welcome to Comic Station, issue number 21 for May 20th, 2013. I am Paul Nisi from Front Towards Gamer.
And I'm Scott Cates of the Comic Station.
And today we have a number of number ones. We have a review, a recommendation, and also an extra special notice at the very end. For our new releases for May 20th, 2013, first I want to just start off with a little notice that Image Comics is doing one of their $1 first issues specials that are out. They run these every once in a while. Some of the notable titles are Chew number 1, Invincible number 1, Saga number 1, and there are plenty of number 1s that they're having out right now. Some series that maybe you've been hearing about, a lot of these have a lot of good fan base. Might be a good time to come and check out the number 1 and see if you're interested.
Absolutely. Plus, it's the only time you're going to pick them up for $1. Walking Dead number 1's one. So all the recent stuff is basically out as well.
There you go. Walking Dead number 1 for $1. Alright, going right into our new releases, our highlights. First one is going to be from DC Comics. This is The Green Team. This is a follow-up from, it's kind of the follow alternation of the movement that we covered on a previous issue of Comic Station. And whereas they are from the slums, they're kids, they're not in the best situation, this is the opposite. These are millionaires, billionaires, just these kids have a lot of money. And this one follows one kid in particular. He's going to an event. It's kind of just more of a hangout, and then you find out by the end of it that they've been investing in becoming superheroes in one way or another, and one in particular gets a little superhero suit. He's fighting this bad guy. Stuff happens, but overall, I'm not completely sold on it. It's just interesting idea. They're going with the whole Occupy Wall Street kind of thing, going back and forth between the two, and I know this was announced during that time. But it doesn't really grip me right now. Maybe they'll grab me in a future issue or something's going to happen, but really, at this point, it's just a bunch of Tony Starks. A bunch of kids, too much money, and they want to become superheroes.
Yeah, I don't see it going anywhere. I thought the same thing about the movement. It just another probably poor attempt by DC to put some stuff out there that just really has no business being out there.
I like that they're trying new things, but this doesn't really grab me too much.
Agreed.
Right. The next one, something new. This one is from Image. This is The Bounce. It's a new superhero. He has the power of being basically, he's a bouncy ball. He's a super ball. He can jump up, bounce off walls, jump high because of being able to spring. He has some ability to vibrate, and he can use that in different ways. But the interesting part of this, and the first issue really centers around the main character, and that he's a flawed hero. The first scene you see of him, he's getting toked up on some drugs, and he sees something bad going, so he goes to help. So he is trying to do good, but he is a little flawed. He's breaking the law while trying to help the law, so forth. So that's the interesting part of this so far. Otherwise, it lost me at the end. The last few pages, just kind of not quite sure what they're going with it. And maybe they'll pick up on issue 2 and I'll find out it's an amazing setup or something. But so far, slightly better than okay. But
typical of Image. I mean, they're putting stuff out almost on a weekly basis, and some of it hits and some of it doesn't quite hit.
They can't all be Walking Deads.
No.
So this one I wanted to highlight mostly because of just being different, and this is from Antarctic Press. This is Steampunk Snow White. This is exactly what it sounds like. It is Snow White retold in a steampunk style with mechanical suits of armor and at the same time very Victorian dresses. The artwork is kind of mediocre. it's nice, but it's not gonna grab anything. I would say this is probably aimed, judging from the artwork, the writing style, the large text and everything, is more towards teens, but people will enjoy it. It is Snow White, so there's not too much you can do with it, but they added in their own flares. So they have, instead of just being the prince, you have the prince is kind of being like a Robin Hood, and the princess ends up doing her thing, trying to help the people as well. So she's more of a warrior princess in this. She doesn't just sit back and let things happen. So I like that part about it. And she has an interesting style, really stands out in this Victorian, almost Victorian steampunk style. Hers is very Chinese. She even fights with a Chinese style sword. And it's really neat. Of course, they also do this interesting thing where instead of the 7 drawers, it's 7 badgers. I'm kind of getting that they're honey badgers, because at one point he says honey heals stuff. So, honey badgers, come on.
What's not to like?
Honey badgers. So, it's an interesting take off of it. I think it's a neat little idea. You can't really get too far off of the Snow White story, but I like what they did with it. It's a nice introduction. It's a nice, easy afternoon kind of read.
And Antarctic Press is one of the few companies that continuously puts out steampunk style comics.
Yes.
So if you're looking for them, that's who you really need to talk to your comic book shop about getting Antarctic Press stuff, because almost on a monthly basis they are putting out some type of steampunk.
Yes, they have a number of them, steampunk fairy tales, they have steampunk, just, they interject it into a lot of things. So if you like that style, Antarctic Press AP Entertainment is where you should look at it. And the last one for our highlights for the new releases. Again, there are other new releases, there are other #1s, but these are our highlights. I'm highlighting Grim Fairy Tales Werewolves The Hunger from Zenescope. This is the #1. This is another Unleashed. Again, we did an Unleashed. We're doing a lot of these titles. It's a big event for Zenescope. And this is one of the tie-ins to the main title, Unleashed. #1 came out and #2 is coming out. So we wanted to highlight these. And in this one, it centers around Roman. He is the werewolf hunter within this. I like it as far as the werewolves. I like the character. I think they could have done a little bit more with Roman. They set some things up where there's a bit of a mystery, and by the end you find out that one person that she's a vet and she might not be trusted. You might not trust her, and at the end you find out you definitely don't trust her. But it's interesting how things tie together. You do get a little bit of insight in the Roman. At one point you find out that he has a little bit of a dark past as far as some of his history with the werewolves and probably why he hunts the werewolves. The artwork is okay. It wasn't outstanding, but I enjoyed it. Not as good as some of the other ones, which we'll actually get to. So overall, it's a nice tie-in, but it's not the standout. It's not Unleashed is their main title, and this doesn't exactly line up with that on quality level. But it is a nice side story, and it'll help flesh out some of that.
Yeah, they're getting better at doing big events. Over the years, it's always been fluff from them, and they, listen, for them to stay around as long as they have, we have to give them some slack with some of their tie-ins and stuff. And listen, whether it's Marvel or DC, not everybody's getting all the tie-ins right, and everybody else.
Oh yeah.
So, we've always recommended Zenescope. It's a nice light reading usually.
They're usually fun, little visceral, little gory. They're not afraid to be more adult. Speaking of which, one of the things that you pointed out and you questioned, there's not much titillation in this, as much as Zenescope tends to do, and I've noticed that the Unleashed event isn't really going off of the scantily clad women as much as Zenescope has done in the past, and I kind of like that. When it does happen occasionally, but when it does, it's a little more fitting, and I don't want to say they're growing up, because I hope they're not, but they're not just throwing it in there for the sake of throwing it in there.
Which, and that's going to change a lot of what their style and storytelling is. So it's still something that I would recommend.
Yes, I've been liking this whole Unleashed, again, when I first reviewed it, I found it was a perfect point to jump into Zenescope, whereas I've been falling behind on the fairy tales before. So, speaking of which, we actually have for the review, we have Hunters, the Shadowland #1, which is an Unleashed tie-in. So that is our review coming out next. For our review today, for issue number 21, as I said, we are going over Hunters, the Shadowlands #1. This is from Zenescope. This is a Grimm Fairy Tales Unleashed event tie-in. And here it is. Really, this one follows the 5 Hunters. It follows the events of actually Unleashed #0. And this preludes the events of Unleashed #1. Whereas #0, they get sucked into the Shadowland. #1, the creatures have come out. This is saying what happened to the Hunters while they were in the Shadowland. I really like this idea. They kind of jumped in for the Unleashed title, so I was wanting to know what happened while they were in there. Because while they're on the outside of the world, in the human world on Earth, they are the Hunters. In the Shadowlands, they're the hunted. There are 5 Hunters in a world of monsters. This one, really, it opens up and it really follows Roman, again tying in with the Werewolves new releases that we did. And it shows more of what he went through, some of the, not just surviving, but the mental impact that it had on him. I thought that was really nice. I think that they really invested a good amount in him, although it does follow up on the other 4. And, of course, they make a fiery, big, showy, flashy entrance coming down in comets. So, it's really neat. I really like how each of the characters is introduced in a quirky manner, where they introduce Sela. They say that she is the Guardian, and then they have something where she thinks she's bitten off more than she can chew. That's the kind of description. And the next one, it introduces another one, and she thinks she's right. Stuff like that. So, it's kind of quirky. It's funny. I like that. The action wasn't overly much. They kind of went in vignettes, and throughout the line, the 4 come in together, then they're separated, and by the end they're together again. I think that the pacing was a little off. It went a little too fast, whereas they could have really explored more, and some of the events where they got separated could have went in more about what happened to them while they were separated. And as much as I like this, I don't exactly want to see everything become a offshoot. But I liked it. It shows how the being is released. It hints at some of the other threats that are within the Shadowlands. Some of the other titles, vampires. You see the Queen of the Vampires in there, so you know, if you've been reading all the tie-ins, you see some of the characters. It fleshes them out a little more. Again, you see what the Queen of the Vampires did while she was in there. So I like it. It really does, out of most of the offshoots that I've read, this one really does expand more on the knowledge of the characters themselves and gives a lot of background. That being said, again, the pacing isn't really up to snuff. They kind of go really quickly, and I thought they could have done more. So the characters are interesting, which is a really good thing, but it's also disappointing that they didn't spend too much time on them. In the end, the review, you can find it on Front Towards Gamer, but in the end, I say hopefully that future issues continue to highlight each of the other 4 characters in a similar manner as they did to Roman, whereas Roman could have been expanded on more. They didn't spend the entire issue on him, so it would be nice to see each issue have a little bit of a focus, but not be the entire story. And I think at the end of the run, it would have expounded upon and really given a lot of depth, each one, without taking up every issue. So this format might leave some really wishing for more insight on each of the characters within each book, but again, on the overall volume, it might make it for a much better volume book. So I recommend this, especially if you've been reading Unleashed, you want to get into the events, and you want a little more background. This is probably, at least so far, one of my favorites of the tie-ins. You have a recommendation?
I do. I'm going to go back to an oldie but goodie. This is DC Comics Aquaman. This is issue number 20. Thank God for Jeff Johns, is what I have to say.
Oh, yes.
Aquaman has been one of the more abused characters over the year. You know, I mean, everybody jokes about him.
He talks to fish.
He talks to fish, you know, I mean, a terrible superpower, blah, 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 blah. Not real tough lookings most of the time. When they brought this back out, Jeff Johns toughened him up. He's a good, strong character again, finally. And the writing's just been magnificent. I mean, other than Scott Snyder for DC, Jeff Johns he's their top writer, and they both write great stuff. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say you really need to give Aquaman a fair shot this time. Of all the 52 things, it's one of the things that they have done really well is to bring him back into prominence. And this is actually number 20, starts a new arc, Death of a King. So good place to jump on. Check it out. He's more moody, he's more tough, and he doesn't really take too much of anything from anybody. So definitely give it a shot. Of the 52, it's definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad if you've been seeing our comics on the Injustice Gods Among Us, or you played the video game, you know that they went more with Jeff Johns' version, and he's a badass. I didn't think I would ever say Aquaman is a badass, but he definitely comes off. He's really cool, and that makes me want to hop into this, so I'll probably go back and get volumes of this and go back on the end and get it in a bigger book. But it made me interested in it again, and Aquaman, who knew he could actually come back and be good. So thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, for our special extra, we actually have on frontdoorsgamer.com right now, there is an interview by Dave Goodman, who usually writes for Geekadelphia, but he has written a interview with JT Krul. He is well known within Aspen. He did DC Comics. He's done a number of issues across different publishers, and one of his newest comics, his newest venture right now, is from Aspen, and it's Journey. I know we've highlighted this before. This is issue number 2, and this came out just today. So, and then he also has a novel that is coming out this month called The Lost Spark, and it's a really good interview, and we want to thank Dave Goodman for writing it and letting us host it on Front Towards Gamer. Okay, and check that out. As always, check out the reviews. All these reviews that I do are also found on Front Towards Gamer. Feel free to leave any comments. Let us know. Front Towards Gamer, you can find the articles attached to these videos, as well as leaving comments within each video on YouTube. Let us know. Do you want us... One thing that has come up is somebody has suggested doing a short 2-minute video on each of the new releases versus doing a segment for the new releases, or say doing a 10-minute video of just new releases, a 5-minute video of review, and then a 5-minute of recommendation. We're open to anything. Let us know. Would some different formatting be more in tune with what everyone is looking for? Again, every Wednesday we come out, new releases, highlights, as well as we try to do a review and recommendation as well. And we will see you next week.
See ya.